October 27, 1962. In the crushing heat of a crippled submarine deep in the Atlantic, exhausted Soviet officers debate launching a nuclear torpedo. Above them, an American reconnaissance plane has just been blasted out of the sky, and strategic air command bombers are idling on runways, armed to wipe out Moscow. In Washington and Moscow, the leaders who started this crisis were desperately trying to end it, realizing that a single misunderstanding could incinerate both their nations. But on the ground in Havana, the perspective was different. For the Cuban leadership, the standoff was not a problem to be solved, but a struggle to be won, regardless of the consequences. By Saturday morning, the greatest risk to global survival came from commands given by a third actor who had stopped listening to the superpowers. For decades prior to the crisis, Cuba functioned as a neo-colonial outpost. American corporate interests monopolized the local economy, dominating lucrative industries like the vast sugar plantations, while the rural poor struggled to survive. That dynamic collapsed when Fidel Castro's socialist revolution seized control of the island in 1959. By nationalizing businesses and driving out foreign corporations, Castro created a massive geopolitical void right on America's doorstep. The CIA attempted a swift correction, backing a 1961 invasion by Cuban exiles. But the Bay of Pigs operation was a disaster. The invaders surrendered in days, and the attack convinced Castro that Washington would never stop trying to destroy his regime. Nikita Khrushchev saw a strategic opening in Castro's desperation. The U.S. held a significant lead in the arms race, with nuclear-tipped Jupiter missiles aimed at the Soviet Union from Italy and Turkey. Placing weapons in Cuba offered Khrushchev a way to balance the scales. As this map illustrates, the strategic goals of these three nations were in direct conflict. The United States demanded communist containment. The Soviet Union required strategic parity with American forces in Europe, and Cuba demanded total control over its own territory. These competing interests locked these nations into a scenario where no single leader had complete command of the outcome. Khrushchev's plan relied on total silence. Throughout the summer of 1962, the Soviets moved over 40,000 troops and dozens of ballistic missiles across the Atlantic in the sweltering hulls of cargo ships, evading detection for months. That secrecy ended October 14th, when an American U-2 spy plane captured photographic proof of the missile launch sites being constructed in the Cuban countryside. 8 days later, President Kennedy went on television to reveal the missiles. He immediately implemented a naval blockade of the island to prevent further Soviet military shipments from reaching Havana. The U.S. military moved to DEFCON 2. Beaches in Florida were fortified with machine gun nests and barbed wire as 120,000 troops prepared for a massive amphibious landing. Kennedy and Khrushchev had used threats to maintain control during the Cold War. Now, their posturing had created an active military crisis that threatened to escape their oversight. Behind the scenes, the superpower leaders began searching for a diplomatic exit. They understood that a direct conflict would result in the destruction of both their nations. The Cuban leadership viewed the standoff differently. Che Guevara and Fidel Castro saw nuclear war as an acceptable sacrifice to ensure the defeat of capitalism. Convinced an invasion was imminent, Castro took independent action. He wrote to Khrushchev demanding a nuclear first strike on the United States and ordered his own batteries to engage any American aircraft over the island. On October 27th, local forces used Soviet-supplied missiles to shoot down a U.S. reconnaissance plane, killing the pilot. The order was issued by officers on the ground, bypassing Moscow's authority. At the same time, an isolated Soviet submarine was being harassed by U.S. signaling depth charges in the Atlantic. Believing a war had already started, the exhausted crew nearly fired a nuclear torpedo. Grave, these unauthorized actions forced Washington and Moscow to realize their control was slipping. Their ally in Havana was no longer waiting for orders. He was actively pushing the world over the edge. To avoid a total breakdown in command, Kennedy and Khrushchev opened a panicked back channel to resolve the crisis before another rogue launch occurred. They reached a compromise. The Soviet Union would dismantle its missiles in Cuba in exchange for a public American pledge not to invade the island and a secret agreement to remove U.S. missiles from Turkey. Fidel Castro learned of the deal from a public radio broadcast. He had been excluded from the negotiations entirely. Castro's fury stemmed from the revelation that his nation was a commodity in a larger trade, bartered away for a few concessions in Europe. His government had risked its survival for a seat at the table, only to be dismissed by its own allies. The fear of repeating such a chaotic escalation led to the installation of a direct hotline between the White House and the Kremlin, ensuring the superpowers would never again rely on slow, indirect communication during a crisis. The world avoided a nuclear exchange, but Cuba's dream of sovereignty was shattered. The crisis left the island in a state of permanent isolation. its future dictated by a superpower it could no longer fully trust.